This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Atom Audio, Isotope, Jay-Z Microphones, and Solid State Logic. You're hearing my voice right now on the Jay-Z V12 microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX100D mic pre and C610 complementer with Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. So please remember to check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes below. It's a great way to help support this show. And now, get ready to rock.
And what I realized was companies like Lewitt, these sort of very modern kind of companies, are essentially understanding that now if you're a kid coming into the music industry, recording your first demos, whatever, you have so much choice in the world of plugins that why would you need a microphone that already puts you in one position? Now, for a guy like you and I that has a vast microphone collection, of course that's fine.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. It's amazing that we can create professional mixes using a computer in our home studios, but trying to mix with a mouse, it's like trying to play the guitar with the tip of a pencil. It sucks. And why shouldn't you be able to mix as naturally as you play the guitar? That's why I upgraded my studio to include the SSL UF8 fader pack and UC1 channel strip controllers. They let me mix as fast as I can feel the music. Go put the fun back into your mixes at solidstatelogic.com. Atom Audio introduces the all-new A7V monitor with rotatable HPS waveguide for the accelerated ribbon tweeter and advanced onboard DSP-based room correction using the included A-Control software or optional SonarWorks software with a measurement mic, allowing you to tune your speakers for your room, your mix position, and your ears anytime you want. Get the extended 5-year warranty for monitors that will improve as your studio improves at atomaudio.com. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Warren Huart, an English record producer, musician, composer, and recording engineer based in Los Angeles, California, who is most associated as a music producer and/or engineer in the recording industry as a multi-platinum producer for the Fray, Daniel Powter, Marc Broussard, Trevor Hall, Korn, Than Ezra, James Blunt, Matisyahu, Ace Frehley, Aerosmith, and Howie, to name just a few. His film and television credits include Inglourious Bastards, Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen, MTV's The Hills, Lost Scrubs, and Grey's Anatomy. Warren is the owner of Spitfire Studio in Los Angeles and runs a DIY YouTube channel called Produce Like a Pro, which you're probably familiar with if you're listening to this podcast. With over 670,000 subscribers at this point worldwide, Warren is an audio educator. He won the 2019 NAMM Tech Award for audio education technology for his Produce Like a Pro website. And that was really awesome. I was actually at NAMM for that, and I remember you winning the award. It was very cool. I was really proud of that. That's great. Warren has been a guest on the show here previously on episode RSR393, where we got a chance to talk about his background and recording tips like choosing the best rock snare drum for recording. I even had a chance to stop by and visit his home studio, and it's Laurel Canyon where you.
It is Laurel Canyon. Yes,
okay, that's what I thought.
Correct.
Yeah, for where we shot a studio tour video, which was a lot of fun. We even got together and shot it was like 10 audio bloggers video all together here in my studio back in 2017 for Summer NAMM. And Warren came to that, and that was just a blast. Today, we're just going to keep talking about what's happening in the studio, mixing, making great records. So please welcome back Warren Huart to Recording Studio Rockstars. Warren, are you ready to marvelously rock today.
One would hope so, excited to talk to you, my friend.
Well, it's great to have you back on the show, dude. I can see
Thanks for having me.
In your video, whether the rock stars are listening to this or seeing a video at some point, I can see what looks like the studio I recognize in the background. Is that the same home studio, or have you, I can't remember if I heard that you had moved studios since I was there last.
Haven't moved, but I've always had lots of studios.
Nice.
And sort of like came down and went back up again. I used to have this studio, which is Spitfire. I had another one called Harmony, and then I owned a studio in West Hollywood, co-owned a studio in West Hollywood for years called Swing House, where I had a Neve room and an API room. So at one stage I had, that had 2 rooms, Harmony 3, 4. So I had like 4 control rooms at one stage. It was all quite silly. And then during the pandemic, I got out of Swing House maybe 6 or 7 years ago. They moved locations. I stopped being a partner of it then. And then I kept Harmony, but during the pandemic, it was impossible. Even though it wasn't an expensive studio, it was just impossible to maintain 2 studios.
Yeah. I think you were even sharing a studio with Glenn Fricker as well, right?
He was using, that was Harmony. He was using Harmony as well.
Okay. So did you ever find yourself in one studio going, I hate this space, and then you go to the other control room and then you're like, this is great. And then later you're like, I hate this space. And you go back to the other studio. Is it one of those?
No, I love them all. I mean, when I was going hell for leather, as it were, I had Swing House, which had an incredible live room where we tracked like How to Save a Life, for instance, the drums on that, the hit song, and then did the whole Aerosmith record there. I did James Blunt, like lots of stuff in that room. That room was phenomenal. It was an incredible drum room. But I had I had an API 20-channel console in that. And then the room next door, I had an 8058. And so I could track in there, and then I could go into the other room and do overdubs and do mixing on the 8058. And then when I built this room, it was great because I had the SSL. I could do guitar overdubs. When I did Aerosmith, we mixed the album in here, and I would do, if the drum room's not very big, but it was perfect for some things that I was doing.
Yeah.
And then Harmony was great because I had a Neve BCM 10 in there, but I had a piano, and I have pianos in this studio as well, but in there I had a Yamaha C7, and that's where my old assistant and one of my best friends, Phil Allen, cut Someone Like You by Adele. So we recorded that there. So it was just, for a while, it was like the perfect scenario because you had the big live tracking room, you had an incredible overdub room with an amazing Neve console, then you had a smaller tracking room with a piano that also had a Neve console. You had this with an SSL. I mean, that's one point we were just kicking butt, making records, continually going around all the rooms.
The biggest challenge would have been LA traffic, just getting from one place to another.
Well, the good thing about Harmony and Swing House is they were literally like 2 blocks down one street and 1 block over. I could get there and back in 5-10 minutes, and it was great. I could be tracking. I could run back, check a mix, go back and track, do overdubs. And plus I had great engineers, Robin, I had a guy called Robin who was fantastic, and then Phil Allen took over, and they're super talented. Everybody, all those guys I were working with were like me. They're all multi-instrumentalists. They could play multiple instruments. So if we ever got stuck, one of us could replay it. I remember when I did X Factor for a couple of seasons, and I would produce the tracks that you would hear on TV. And I would do things like we would produce the tracks here. I'd then go to where the filming was, and we'd run a dress rehearsal. And Simon would go, don't like the key. Can you bring it down a tone or a semitone for the singer? They're not hitting the notes, or vice versa. Can you bring it up? And so I'd literally just, call Phil up and go, Phil, we have to change the key of the song, and he would start replaying some of the guitar parts, and and then I'd come back and re-put in a line, and and it's just it was great working with other multi-instrumentalists. It's another reason why I know it's not a prerequisite to be a musician producer, but it sure as heck does help. in those situations, otherwise what are you going to do? You're going to be booking in, and I play drums badly. He plays drums better than me. So if we got really, really stuck, one of us would just go in and replay the drums. And, and it was great. It was great for making records. We could be completely self-contained.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like you made a switch from the engineering to including yourself as an instrumentalist on projects, or were you always including yourself as a musician as well?
I was always that guy. I was always that guy, always doing, because it's hard not to. This sort of opens up a can of worms here for me, because one of the things you know this about being online, people will write to me and say, the band aren't very good players, or, have these issues with the bands and the artists that they work with. And while I relate, I also don't, because there's also a part of me is like, well, isn't that kind of what we're going to do? That people come to us as a one-stop shop. I'm never going to complain. So we just did a mixing competition, and somebody said, "Oh, there's some digital pops in it. I can't believe it. That's so unprofessional." And I was just like, welcome to the music industry. I can't tell you how many big records I've worked on. Things happen, It doesn't make it that whole idea, that's our job. Our job is to make something better.
Yeah.
It's to get the best performance out of people to do stuff. So to answer your question more directly, I've always been that guy, because if somebody came in and they were struggling with the guitar part, I would spend ages working on it with them, showing them how to play it. And if they couldn't do it, yes, I would replay it.
Yeah. I've had lots of experience with that, helping to guide people through parts and stuff like that. And I've also had the pleasure and the experience of having permission or a budget to bring in a session player. And it really is it's a remarkable thing to see what those two versions can look like. I've had the situation where I've worked with an artist, and maybe they brought in the session guys for one version of 5 songs. And then for the next 5 songs, we really want to use the band, and you do that one. And then you get to the end and you look at these 2 versions and you're like, okay, now I can really see, what each one of these sounds like. And it's interesting because you've got you could have a sound quality of session players, but then you can have a career, potency of career and sustainability of them working with the musicians that are also going to play the live shows and stuff like that,
Yeah, I've had all kinds of experiences. I think one of the misconceptions of session players is, how can I best phrase this? Here's a good way to describe it. I'll get a phone call or an email regularly that is this: Warren, you need to check out my friend John, Frida, Carol, David. They're the best drummer ever. You need to check them out. You should use them.
Wait, Carol K? Because you probably should check her out. No matter where you like to rock in the galaxy, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron lets you record up to 2 terabytes over USB-C with speeds of up to more than 1 gigabyte per second, transfer your tracks in a flash, and take your samples and sessions with you to the studio or stage. The OWC Envoy Pro Electron is your waterproof, dustproof, and crush-proof SSD that you can rely on. Use our custom link in the show notes to help support this podcast at macsales.com/rockstars. If you've ever wondered how I get a consistent sound quality mixing hundreds of episodes of Recording Studio Rockstars, it's because I've been cheating by using Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on every single episode. Right now, you're hearing on my voice RX breath control, D-click, D-clip, DS, Deplosive, voice denoise, Ozone multiband compression, Neutron EQ, and limiting, all from Isotope. Check out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars, or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase.
But somebody has some new guy or girl that they really love and they want me to check them out. And So I'll be like, okay, I'll take the bait, and I'll be like, tell me about them. Well, they just graduated Berkeley or they graduated here and they're really phenomenal. You should check them out. And I was like, get them to call me in 5 years. And they're always like, no, you don't understand. And I was like, great session players. See, this is where the disconnect is, because I think a lot of people think that session players are just like these technically gifted geniuses. Yeah, if it's Vinnie Colaiuta and you're making a jazz rock 7/4 multiple key change, different whatever, then only a guy like Vinnie is going to handle it. I've used him in those situations. Phenomenal. I did orchestral pieces with like 5 different tempo changes and time signature changes and everything. And Vinnie will read the chart like he's been playing the song for 20 years. Unbelievable. But most of the time, the best session players you hire are the ones that make it sound like they've been in the band for a year touring the songs. And there's this sort of misconception that the session player is going to come in and go, and it's like, it's the truth. I get this. I get pitched this all day. I get a player comes in and I start working with them. And I'm like, dude, it's easier for me to work with the band than it is to work with the fresh off the boat session player, because the fresh off the boat session player is trying to show off just how great a drummer he is, for instance, if it's a drummer, when really what I want is the band performance, the fire and the energy that the band guy is, but just with more even hits, because the drummer's and somebody who doesn't smash their cymbals too loud, that's what a great session player can do. They can come in and make it feel like they've been in that band for a year, but they also know how to play balanced, so that when you've got room mics set up in a big room, for instance, it's not just all cymbal bleed. You're actually hearing a good performed kick and snare. It's not about perfection, as it were, and it's certainly, definitely not about technique and showing off cleverness and things like that. So that's why I think there's a journey with musicians that maybe are wanting to become session players fresh out of college with all their new chops that they've learned. They need to get beaten up. They need to work with guys like me and you and be told to stop overplaying, to listen to the song, because they come fresh out of college with like all these incredibly great ideas and all this kind of stuff. And then and it's great. We all want to be, everybody wants to be in Snarky Puppy. But the reality is like Snarky Puppy is a niche market. It is 1% of what the music is made every day. Trust me, I love this. Sput is a friend of mine. He's one of the greatest drummers in the world. He plays with Toto at the moment. Phenomenal drummer. And he knows how to play in any situation. He's incredible. But if you're just going to play like he plays when he's playing, with Mono Neon or whatever, with Ghost Notes or anything like that, if he's going to be playing, that's a very niche thing that he does, and he's absolutely incredible. But I'm sure he could get hired to come in and play like on a folk rock record and nail it, because he knows how to turn that on. The problem is that all of us, we're all guilty of this. We all want to like be that niche, It's a little bit like when I'm working with bands and I'm trying to get a really good song out of them. And they say things like, I don't want to sell out. And I'm like, well, how about selling?
How about selling anything at all?
Yeah. And I try to remind them, I say to them, well, are you a Cure fan? Most bands, of course, are like, oh yeah, Robert Smith's a genius. And I was like, yeah, he wrote Love Cats. He famously jokes about it. And I think at the time he made a joke, whether it was true or not, that he got this huge tax bill and it was going to bankrupt him. So he had to write a pop song to get a single on the charts to generate some income to pay the bills. Whether that's true or not, but it's that analogy. The point is like for artists, we have to remember that we all want to be the coolest guy on the planet. Every singer-songwriter wants to be Bob Dylan in 1965. You know what I mean? They want to be that guy. And I get it. Absolutely get it. I'm sure every girl singer-songwriter wants to be Joni or Carole King, Tapestry 1971, or Joni Hajira 76 or something. I mean, who wouldn't? After the Gold Rush, Neil Young, that we all want to be that artist. Unfortunately, there's no room for that. Only you have to be able to be commercially viable. It doesn't mean you have to sell your soul to the devil and suddenly become a disposable pop star, But you've got to find a middle ground where people know who you are. Best analogy for that, of course, is Radiohead. Radiohead, The Bends, I think, is probably one of the greatest albums ever made, closely followed by OK Computer and many other great records that they made. And I love The Bends, even though it was a flop in America. It had 5, I think, top 10 singles.
That had Plastic Trees on it, didn't it?
Yeah, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
OK Computer was the sort of...
Yeah, that was the big
American
breakout.
But you see, what happened in America is Radiohead the reason why I'm using this analogy, Radiohead Creep. And it became a grunge anthem. And then the Bends came out and everybody in America was like, oh, this sucks, it's not grunge. And it didn't do well. But it exploded in Europe, and then America sort of caught up and everybody went and bought OK Computer. But my point is, regardless of the history of it, it needed Creep. Without Creep, there is no Bends, and there's certainly no OK Computer. They needed that big smash hit song to get the money. I feel like Boogie Nights. It's the money. You need to get the money. They're on the tapes. Yeah, it's the magic on the tapes. No, so they needed money. They needed success from Creep to be able to go and create this beautiful catalog and this incredible legacy that Radio have of some of the greatest albums ever made.
Do you think that when they were writing Creep, they knew that they were writing something that would be more popular than another song?
I don't think so, because it was a slow burner, remember?
Yeah.
It wasn't immediate. It took a long time. I don't think Blur, I know Graham fairly well, and I don't think when they did song 2 that they thought it was going to be a surefire smash hit. Bear in mind that that vocal, for instance, is a handheld 57 with tons of bleed, and the lyrics are just made up. They don't make any sense. I got it right there. You know what I mean? It's just he was just making it up. It's funny though, because I did a video with Graham and we talked about how it's just made up in the room, but then all these people are debating like, no, this means this and means that. And it's like, trust me, Damon just was making it up. There wasn't any meaning behind it. Yeah. But if it means something to somebody, it does. Anyway, getting back to the point and what you were talking about, the reality is like, an engineer that's a producer, that's a multi-instrumentalist, it's like it's an asset upon an asset upon an asset. Yeah. And we just have to humble ourselves that it is our job. I know people get really weird about like, well, that means I'm producing, but they hired me as an engineer. It's like, then don't do it. Then don't make the music great. I don't get it. I don't understand that philosophy. If somebody comes into me and says, I'm producing my record, but I want to hire you as an engineer, this is how much I'm paying you. And then I suggest guitar lines and I suggest ideas and maybe even replay parts. If they want to credit me as a co-producer, great. But I cannot have a resentment issue about it. Right. Because they hired me to do a job. If I want to then do more, which is I'm always going to want to do because I want the music to be amazing. Yeah, how can you want to hold back, Why are you going to hold back and be like, well, it's more than my job's worth. They only pay me to engineer. Well, you know what? You're in the wrong profession. You're completely in the wrong profession. I don't get a lot of those comments, but I do see that, my artist isn't professional enough. Right. This and I had a digital pop. I can't believe there was a digital pop on this. That's so unprofessional. It's like, that's our job, It's our job. It's like, we've been paid since the beginning of time in recording music, that's funny, but you know what I mean? Everybody I know to just make it better. And you have to do whatever you can to get to that result. Putting a limitation on it because it's a job description or a monetary thing is never going to work. And it's certainly not going to further your career. Most of the gold and platinum records I got here I was being hired by, first-time producers, people that didn't know what they were doing. And so they hired me because they knew as an engineer that I was going to bring it, that I was going to sit there and co-write the song, that I was going to like replay the guitars if necessary, or work with the guitarist one-to-one, work on the drum beats, work on everything. They knew that's what they were going to get when they hired me. The JZ Microphone Vintage series are built by hand in Latvia, featuring the patented golden drop capsule design for enhanced clarity that will give your recordings that classic vintage tone. You're hearing my voice right now on the JZ V12 mic. Our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer only available to Recording Studio Rockstars listeners, so use the limited time coupon ROCKSTAR to get 40% off the V67, V47,
V1 and V12 microphones. Go to jzmic.com and get your vintage mic now. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One Reaper, or whatever you're using. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. It reminds me of a session I did with Glenn Rosenstein, a producer here in Nashville, and he had hired me as a kind of a younger engineer to accompany him and track a band out of town, another studio. And I just grabbed everything that I thought I'd need for a session just instinctively. And he pointed it out later. He was like, I noticed, you came to do this thing, but you brought a strobe tuner with you to make sure the guitars were intonated before the session. You brought your own microphones in case we needed more microphones. And I was just like, yeah, that's just, you got to have a great session, But it was that same thing. It's when we learn how to make things the best we can, how are you going to hold back? You got to just do your best with that. But, part of my question too, with the playing and engineering, and you're answering it, so I can stop asking the question. But, sometimes I think we feel like as a player, we might have more to offer than we give ourselves credit for, And I think it's good to encourage the rock stars to remember, like, if you can play guitar well, don't hold back, offer it. There's probably a lot of people out there that would love for you to play bass and guitar on their session. Maybe you still have to work with the drummer, but you don't have to. It's hold back.
Each situation is different. Sometimes I like working with solo singers because I do get to play instruments and all that kind of stuff. I really, really enjoy that. And I think it's a blessing to be able to work with a solo artist and play the bass, play the drums, play guitar, whatever it might be. But there are many, many situations where it's just my job to get there and get amazing performances out of those artists and encourage their creativity. Because at the end of the day, that's my job. I'm happy when I'm co-writing, for instance, or co-producing or whatever, or producing an artist, that the next time I work with them, they're a better songwriter, they're a better producer, they're a better player. I feel like I've done my job. It's not, at the end of the day, all of this conversation is to remember it's not about me. It's never about me. It's about the artist.
Right.
And we have to be really sensitive to this, especially when you're working with singers. They have one voice. They're a singer. They're not like us where I can go on to another project. I could be doing death metal one week and the next week I could be doing a folk record. If they're a folk artist and they've got like this wispy, beautiful voice, they're not going to be doing death metal on next week. This is who they are. So I have to be very, very sensitive to that and be encouraging and trying to get the best from them, remembering that this is not their one shot, but it's who they are. And I need to be reinforcing and encouraging them and making them feel confident. And if I do all those things, 99.9% of the time, people come back. They just come back.
Yeah. I love working with people in the studio. I love, I just was working with an individual singer. Sometimes I'm working with a band. I love going through the process of trying to make them feel like they're having a great experience through it. It just makes it a lot of fun and it gives you better results. So speaking of, I'm glad you brought up working with an individual singer and a songwriter like that. One of the questions I thought I'd ask you is just talking about working with a singer, like, decisions that you make based on a singer coming in. Maybe it's a new singer, maybe it's somebody you haven't worked with yet. Let's say you've got a female songwriter or vocalist coming into the studio. What are some things you try and decide before they get in there and get on a mic? If you have a singer who comes in is going to they might have a soft voice and it might be that kind of thing, or they might be a strong kind of country singer and have, sort of a quiet tone, but then a strong chorus tone too. What are some things that you might think about as far as choosing a mic or setting up or getting ready for a session like that?
Well, to sort of start at the beginning, pre-production is super important to me. And so all of these decisions are pretty much made there. If I'm doing pre-production when I'm doing pre-production with the singer, I'm pulling apart the songs. I'm making sure that they're in the right key. Sometimes I need some rewriting, but yeah, right key, right tempo, right arrangement. All of that stuff is done. And during that process, that's a massive process of discovery. As far as microphone and stuff like that for vocals, I mean, I'm blessed that I have a massive mic locker. And if I have access to really great microphones, typically, I have a U47 that's, built in the 1953 or something like that, which sounds phenomenal. I have a BAE 1028 going into a 165 VU and 1176, and that's been my vocal chain with a couple of exceptions for, since early 2000s. I've had a Brent Averill 1073 since like 2001. So, all the Fray records, Aerosmith, blah, 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 it's all done like that. So I'm so used to having that sound. And regardless of the singer, that's usually the microphone that works. Now, with modern microphones...
Are there times where a strong vocal can be a little too much for a vocal mic choice like that, or for the chain? Or is it usually...
The things that usually... I can tell you what usually switches... There's certain singers, like... Now, the newer mics that we like really do like the 1040. It's not cheap. It's like $3,500. That's the Lewitt LCT 1040, because I feel like it just...
Yeah.
It can do what my U47 can do, and it has variations. So we've been really digging that. That's
the one where you get to make some decisions after the fact, right?
No, during. It's during, yeah.
Okay.
The after the fact one is the 640 TS, where you've got the polar patterns. But I do like that. And then I have a plethora of choices of microphones if I really want to get a certain sound on a certain singer. My voice actually sounds really good on I think the entry-level Mojave. It's actually what it sounds best on. I seem to work best on cheap microphones. I don't know. And I have a good friend of mine, Jamie Hartman, the songwriter. When I did his solo record, he sounded best on a 414, and he said to me, I'm going to be best on a 414. And I'm like, no, I've got this beautiful U47. This did like these huge records. And he comes up and sounded like butt on it. And then I put him on the 414. And he sounded great. So there's always those kind of like people that it just does or doesn't work.
Yeah.
But then in other situations, obviously handheld for people that are live performers, and they might just want to hold that microphone and do all that stuff.
Yeah.
57s, 58s get used like that. I have no problem with an SM7. I think it's a great mic.
I love SM7s.
Yeah. The bottom line is, before we get too up our own butts with the beautiful choices of microphones, is that pretty much these days, most $500 to $1,000 microphones will make a record that will go on the radio that nobody would ever know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say all $300 or less, but there's a handful of $300 or less microphones that are phenomenal. And there's a few that, there was one about 5 or 10 years ago that everybody raved about. I mean, we both know what mic I'm talking about. And you've noticed it hasn't stood the test of time. I could never understand why that was popular. And I even had reputable people saying, it sounds better than my U87. I'm like, no way. No way. So there has been some cheap kind of microphones, and if you're wanting to expand your mic locker and get a couple of additional condensers, just look at the ones that are sticking around. I think the Lewitt have been sticking around, the Loughton have been sticking around, Mojave have been sticking around. All those companies have got 10, 15, 20 years worth of affordable microphones that they're not that, this is hip this week and we've sold hundreds of this particular thing. I also think America has ignored Audio-Technica, which I think is an absolute travesty.
I just broke out my 4033 for a guitar.
Yeah. Audio-Technica mics. we're talking about these other companies, but yeah, Lewitt, Mojave, Loughton, Audio-Technica should never be ignored. The 4050 is one of the best mics on the market for its price. It's a travesty because you go to Europe, and of course Japan, obviously, but you go to Europe, every studio has a plethora of them and knows that it's just a good, go-to, dependable, great sounding, affordable mic. But yeah, be careful on the 300 and less. There's a couple of good ones, a couple not so good. But I think once you get to that sort of 500 and above, you're making records. And there's always a tough one. People ask me gear questions at a certain price point. It almost becomes interchangeable. Somebody will say to me, "Oh, I bought this mic pre and it was $1,500. I was thinking of buying this other $1,500 mic pre." I'm like, they all sound great. I am a fan of a lot of different companies. We've been blessed. Everything I've tried, what I typically do on reviews, if something is really bad, I don't review it. I just ignore it. We've been sent some gear over the years, only a couple of instances, but a couple of times where it was just not good and it was overpriced and underperformed, and we just didn't review it.
Yeah, this is sort of like, what's the point? I remember my buddy was writing music reviews for a local newspaper, and he told me once, he was like, unless it's some superstar that puts out a bad record that's already on everybody's radar, it's sort of like, what's the point of writing a bad review of a record?
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because like every major artist that's done important albums over the years, you go back and there's always like half a dozen terrible reviews saying it was the worst record ever made. Now it's considered the best record ever made. I mean, when Pinkerton came out, it was a flop because it didn't sound like the first Weezer record. And of course, it's everybody's favorite Weezer record. Mud Slim Slide, I was reading about that James Taylor record, and the Rolling Stone review of it is one of the worst reviews of an album all time. And now, of course, it's in the top, 500 albums, the greatest albums ever made. It's just the way it works. Led Zeppelin's, almost all Led Zeppelin's albums for Rolling Stone were completely trashed. Never mind the initial review, they gave it 2 out of 5 stars and then re-reviewed it after it became a hit and gave it 4. It's just, this is the way it is. So it's not, we have to be careful. My style, not you're asking this question, but just because I brought it up, my style of reviewing is to find out who it's for. So, for instance, I just reviewed a week ago, we did the Luna, the new Luna by UAD.
Right.
That is for you and me. That is for people that want a mic pre that has a certain sound and a compressor built in that we grew up using that gear and we just want to throw up a mic and make it sound like it's nice kind of maybe slightly saturated mic pre with a tiny bit too much compression. And you pull it up on fader and go, that sounds like a record,
right.
That is for you and me. Is it for a 14-year-old first interface? No way. I would never recommend it to a beginner, their first. Why do they need that? Why do they even need to know what a Lem 76 is? They've got all those things inside.
They need to know how to tune their guitar.
Yeah, it's like they need something clean. They need something that just is like, doesn't clip, is super clean. Buy the Evo, starting off, buy the Evo 4 or something like that. You don't need the Luna. The Luna's great for somebody who already knows what they want. So my point is that I review it from that perspective. I did a cover of a Beatles song, and I was like, for a guy like me, we just banged out a song in a day, recorded and mixed it, and go, here you go. This is what you can do with the unit. So to me, that's reviewing something. If something's truly dreadful, it doesn't get reviewed, and you can go through the interfaces and see the ones that aren't reviewed and figure out what I don't like.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the Luna right now. I hadn't seen that one yet, but that's pretty cool.
Oh, sorry. It's not the Luna. I keep calling it Luna. It's the software. It's the Vault. It's
the Vault. Sorry, yeah.
I don't know why I keep calling it the Luna. Eric
came up with that.
Yes, the Vault. It was the 4-input Vault, and we did drums on it and everything, and it came out great.
Yeah, and so that also has it's an interface, but it also gives you the ability to process the UAD plugins, right? Which is cool.
Yeah, so it's all about coloring. It's all about
Yeah, nice. Well, so let me ask you that in that context. What's some stuff in your studio that you're just really excited about now? What are you psyched to try out next, or just something you're psyched to do in the studio?
I'm looking around. going back to Lewitt again, they're getting double push today. They're not paying me to say this, but they did just send us an interface.
Nice. Oh, yeah, they just released a new one, I know. And this will come out later, so this may be a little dated. Adam Audio introduces the new A7V monitor for home and pro studios, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. The all-new A-series line of monitors delivers the same highly accurate, transparent sound and unique accelerated ribbon tweeter design that has made Adam Audio famous for over a decade, but now introduces new innovations such as the rotatable high-frequency propagation system waveguide, allowing the XART tweeter to disperse sound with controlled consistency, and DSP-based room correction and speaker voicings. Using the A-Control software or SonarWorks and a measurement mic, you can now integrate advanced filters directly onto the DSP on board the speaker to help compensate for imperfect room acoustics without introducing annoying latency or requiring plugins. This allows you to tune your monitors for your room, your mix position, and your ears anytime you want to meet your ever-evolving studio needs. Get the extended 5-year warranty for monitors that will improve as your studio improves at adamaudio.com. For 15 years, I recorded hundreds of bands like Jack White, Adele, and the Black Keys in my hay bale studio at the Bonnaroo Festival. I had to work fast and deliver finished mixes to the radio DJs within an hour, so I chose to use the solid-state Logic AWS 948 Plus for my mixing console. There's just no substitute for mixing on a real console. Until now, that is. SSL brings you the UF8 and UC1 controllers so that you can recreate the feel and speed of mixing on a console with the flexibility of mixing on your computer in your home studio. Paired with the SSL Channel Strip 2 and 4000B plugins, you can now get a world-class sound using real faders and real knobs to mix as fast as your ears will guide you. Levels, panning, EQ, and compression, they're all built right into the controllers. So go put the feeling back into your mixes at solidstatelogic.com.
We actually used it yesterday on a piano track with Steve. So we're doing a track using that. It's super light. It looks like something out of Tron. We've realized that we think the Austrian designers have been watching a lot of Tron over the years, because now we realize that Lewitt is Tron. No, but it's lightweight. If it's going to be like their mics, it's going to be have a really low self noise. What I love about the Lewitt stuff, is the fact that they are the most transparent sounding gear, like their microphones.
Yeah.
When we were in, and that's not always good or bad. That's not always good. That's not always bad. When we were in Blackbird a few years ago, we did a masterclass with my friend Steve Majora, and we put up multiple mics on a piano, and we listened back, and we could not believe how good the 640 TS was. It just sounded exactly like standing over the piano. Like playing, listening, going back and playing. It was like the most accurate thing. And we put up a pair of 87s, which we were expecting to be like that. And they weren't. They were super colored. They rounded off the transients. They seemed to be just slightly warmer. And all the things that we like. But I was a little unexpected because I thought the 87 was going to be the one that was going to be like the most perfect. And what I realized was companies like Lewitt, these sort of very modern kind of companies, are essentially understanding that now, if you're a kid coming into the music industry, recording your first demos, whatever, you have so much choice in the world of plugins that why would you need a microphone that already puts you in one position? Now, for a guy like you and I that has a vast microphone collection, of course, that's fine. I know that a D12 is going to be great on a kick drum. It's also going to be good on a bass guitar. It's also pretty nifty on an electric guitar when you're trying to get a much darker, fatter tone.
Mm-hmm.
I know that, and I have lots of microphones. So we have maybe, 50, 60, 70 microphones. So I can make those decisions. Now, if you've got one mic, you want a mic that's a utilitarian, super clean, very accurate, that you can put in any situations, a vocal, a snare drum, a guitar, a bass amp, a room mic, piano, whatever it is. And then afterwards, open up the plugin and go, okay, I want it to be a little darker. I want to put a tape emulation on it.
Yeah.
I want to put some transformers in the way. I want to try this Neve mic pre-emulation, blah, blah. All of that stuff. that's a modern way of thinking, because I don't know if I was doing this again, I would go out and collect 70 microphones. I certainly wouldn't be using an SSL console. This is just something I aspired to when I was younger, and I really wanted one, so I got one. But I don't know if anybody's coming up is going to go out and buy a 4000. I don't know if anybody, you know what I mean? We have to be very cognizant of this stuff, that the vintage stuff, as much as I love it, here's a good analogy. I've used it before. Maybe I used it in a different interview with you. My wife's stepfather, God rest his soul, he died a couple of years ago. Was a wonderful guy. He's a crazy story. But he was an opera singer, but he was also a stamp collector. And so I think it was the first time I met him, I went over to her mother and his house, and I was quite excited because of course, Britain, did the first postage stamp, very famously, the penny black, which is Queen Victoria, and 1 penny. And so I get all excited, and I go in and I go, do you have a penny black? And he goes, oh yeah, of course. And he brings out and shows me like penny blacks, multitudes of. And I was like, how much is this worth? He's like, oh, it's worth quite a bit. He goes, but the 2 penny blue is worth a lot more. And he showed me that. And I was like, wow, how much is that? And I think he says like $10,000. I was like, wow, He goes, but this, and then he opens up and he brings out this like, perfectly sealed in a glass case, whatever, stamp, and says to me, this stamp is worth $250,000.
Good Lord.
And then he goes, in theory. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, there's only 6 people alive that would want to collect this, and they all have one. So there's my analogy on vintage gear.
Yeah.
We have to be aware of this. It's like, there are many young people coming up that aspire, but think about cars. I have a really nice car. I have a Jag F-Type sports car, whatever. I've aspired to wanted to have one my whole life. I wanted an E-Type, but trying to have an E-Type and keep it running is not smart. So I bought the newer version of it,
Yeah.
My son will probably be very, very happy to aspire to a Tesla Model 3, as will most kids growing up now. He's 15. He'll want something that's electric. He looks at my car and he thinks it's fun, and we go for a couple of drives, occasional Sundays and stuff like that, and he really enjoys it. But at the end of the day, it's when you and I are dead and buried in 100 years' time, there's not going to be the vast majority of people aspiring to the things that we're talking about. They need far more pragmatic, modern solutions to stuff.
Yeah.
And I love all this gear, and I know many of your listeners and my viewers and listeners as well love all this stuff. But we have to be practical about it. This is all incredible gear, but we have to champion and help elevate some of this modern stuff that's coming out, because that's the way that we're going to bring young people into our industry. I don't want to be one of those stick in the muds. It's like, oh, when I go to, some of those very well-known forums, maybe even singular forum, it's ridiculous when I see somebody like, you don't know what you're doing unless you use a 1969 blah, blah, blah with the so-and-so, transformer into the... It's great, sure, but all that does is put up a massive barrier to entry. It's a bit like that. I've talked about this over the years with the music theory stuff. I see it's been dissipating. Hopefully I've helped do that. But there was a period of time where I used to get like daily emails from people that were worried about whether they would ever be able to write songs and stuff. And I'd have to like help validate them. They're like, well, I just watched this video and this guy told me the song was like a diatonic blah, blah, blah with a Phrygian, Lydian, so-and-so diminished. I don't know any of that stuff. How am I going to write a song? And I'm like, who is the song? And they go, well, it was a song by, whatever artist. And I was like, I know that artist. That artist wouldn't know a fourth if it hit him in the head with a brick.
Right. Yeah.
Just because somebody wants to intellectualize it and be superior and elitist by going, oh, it's Phrygian, blah, blah, blah. The point is the people writing the music aren't that. The people recording the music. It's really important for us, and I love the educational quotient of understanding that. Don't get me wrong, but please don't ever take gear and theory and stuff as a what. Don't take it as like a barrier to entry, because
no, it's like an enhancement for us.
It's an enhancement. But the bottom line is, unfortunately, most of the greatest music ever written was by people that wouldn't even know that they're playing a 1-4-5 chord progression. They just know A, D, and E sounds really good
right,
when Chuck Berry does it, so they wrote a new song.
Yeah.
And then they tried this minor chord in there. Oh, that's pretty cool. That's how they.
That sounds like a bridge.
Sounds like a bridge.
Or a middle eight, as you might say, too.
Yeah, both, depending on the context. But yeah, so that's the point. It's like, if you know music theory, great. I love it. Keep learning. I can read and write music. Probably use that once every 10 years. You know what I mean? I do understand modes. I do love playing jazz. I love all those things.
Yeah, I've heard you pick up a guitar. You know what you're doing.
Yeah, but it's what I do for my enjoyment.
Yeah.
I have a Guild Starfire from 62 at home. When I've got a day off, I just sit there and I listen to jazz and I jam along and play. It's what I do for pleasure and it's what I love.
Yeah.
But for my living, 99% of my life is G, C, D, A minor, E minor, maybe taking the 3 chord and making a dominant seventh to make the 4 chord be the chorus. But you know what? I did all that before I knew what any of those things were, because I heard them in a song and I was like, that's interesting. What is that?
Yeah.
Can you throw me an acoustic?
Are you doing a lot of power chords, or are you playing thirds in there? Are you playing full open chords?
Whatever serves the song. Yeah. But I remember being a kid. I can't remember what song it was, but I remember, doing this song. Yeah, the 1-4-5, and then go, and doing the 3 chord and liking it. And then I heard a song. It might have actually, who was it? But anyway, I remember, and then going, whoa, that's interesting then.
Yeah.
And I think we might have Burt Bacharach or something that my father was playing, and I had to figure it out. There's a great story of Paul McCartney. You've probably heard this, and all your listeners have heard this. Getting on a bus, I think with John, to go to the other side of Liverpool to hang out with a guy who they had heard knew how to play the B7 chord. Because there was no book, there was no library with music books in. It was probably the late 50s. You couldn't go to there was no internet or whatever. And I often wonder, with the amount of education that's coming at us, the amount of information, the amount of experts in the field, and I use that with inverted commas, experts like telling everybody the way it is and all this kind of stuff. I often wonder, whether they're removing that journey. You had John and Paul playing 1-4-5 Chuck Berry tracks for years, and then learning new chords and incorporating and growing with it and developing it. So by the time, it's not as used as often as it used to be, but by the time they'd done their 10,000 hours, they had a foundation to build on. Yeah.
Well, I mean, a great part of what we do in learning is the journey, the process of the discovery. I mean, having the answer is great, but the answer sticks with us because it has context. So like if you learn that B7 and you remember the experience of taking the bus to get across town, then it really sticks with you. Or if you remember the song you learned it from, if you just learn what a B7 is without any context, it's just a chord,
Yeah, I feel like, it's coming into my mind for songwriting. It's like, learn how to write an incredible song with those first 3 chords. Write incredible songs with those, and then figure out why you might need more. I've worked with so many musicians that can run circles around you technically, but I've never written a song that's worth remembering. And that's more prevalent than ever before because we have so much access that everybody's learning all of this clever stuff. But when you break down what they're writing, you're like, it's just you showing me your knowledge.
Yeah, who's doing Instagram channels where all they do is just play 1-4-5 really slowly over and over? The basics.
Just songwriting. Yeah, it's
everybody's doing flashy stuff. That's when my uncle's the one who taught me how to play guitar. And on the porch, he used to play all the old cowboy songs and stuff. And when he wanted to show me how to play, he was like, "All right, he called me Elijah, or here Elijah. He might have called me Lidge at the time. Here's what you need to know to play any song. This is the basic right here. You just need to know 3 chords." And he was like, "Here's A and B." And then he showed me B7. So I beat the Beatles to it. I learned B7 was one of the first chords I learned.
Look at you.
Hey, I like using it.
So advanced.
I like using it. It's a good one. A little hard to play that. There's a lot of junk that needs to get cleaned up in a podcast or music mix. Boomy pops on the microphones, piercing sibilants, background noise, harshness, distortion, wild dynamics, and EQ correction. And all this editing and mixing cleanup would be impossibly time-consuming were it not for the magic of Isotope RX, Ozone, and Neutron. Isotope gives you a collection of plugins for mixing in your DAW to manage plosives, clicks, S's, noise, buzz, reverb, breaths, and even guitar fret squeaks with set it and forget it simplicity. Check out the new Repair Assistant plugin to help you find the perfect mix prep settings for any instrument. And the standalone RX app includes new features like text transcription and multiple speaker recognition for easy editing and navigation. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. The OWC Envoy Pro Electron is your super fast and rugged pocket-sized portable USB-C SSD that keeps your music safe in the studio or on the stage. With storage of up to 2 terabytes and speeds of up to more than a gigabyte per second, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron gives you high-speed audio data for recording and playback. Take your sessions and sample libraries with you anywhere you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crush-proof, so there's no need to worry about your music anymore. Find the new Envoy Pro Electron and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars and use the custom link below in our show notes because it's a great way for you to help support this podcast. So thanks, Rockstars. Well, so tell us a little bit about Produce Like a Pro, because you do all kinds of stuff, Warren. And if the rock stars, if some of them don't know about you, you have an incredible resource, an incredible home base there to bring people together, whether it's, old guys like me or whether it's new young students who are learning how to make records and use plugins. What are you guys up to over there? Congrats on winning the Tech Award. What are you excited about? And I've got lots more questions, but what's new over at Produce Like a Pro?
What's new? We do content every single week, both on the channel, both inside of the Produce Like a Pro Academy. Mark Daniel Nelson, who's been one of our mentors now for a couple of years.
He's great.
He's now full-time in the Academy, so he's doing stuff in there, which he just did like a free course inside the Academy where he was talking about plugin paralysis. So he streamed live for a couple of hours, which was a lot of fun. It's really just about expanding it. Manny Nieto has been really great. We've got a lot of musicians that are coming from the Academy that we're starting to use in our videos. So if you watch some of the videos, some of those people are Academy members that have just grown as musicians, producers, and artists in their own right.
I didn't know you were working with Manny Nieto. I had him on my show. He actually needs to come on this show. I had him on my first show. But if I recall correctly, he was the one who went over to China and did a couple of trips just recording bands there with a totally homespun recording studio.
Yeah, he did. It's his journey is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
No, Manny's a good friend. He's done stuff inside the Academy. We've done courses with us. He's flying to AES to be with us. We're going to do some stuff out there. He's also doing a series of videos for the channel as well. We're big fans of Manny's.
Yeah.
And he makes his own ribbon microphones.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know about that. I'll have to get back in touch with him. Rockstars, when I go to conferences, which I enjoy doing, like NAMM or AES, inevitably I will run into Warren and his guys shooting some video. And both of us tend to be so busy that if we can just do a high five and just be happy to see each other, that's about all we get, so I'm sure I'll see you there.
Are you going to be you're going to AES?
Yes, I'm going to be there. This will be out afterwards, but yeah, that's the plan. It's cool to see what you guys are doing. And I know you've got some free resources over there as well, which, is probably something I'd mention at the end of the show, which we're not quite up to yet, but we have a lot. Yeah, we do. Yeah, tell the rock stars what they should go check out over there, because you've got tons of free stuff to get started with right away.
Yeah, I mean, we got most of my sample library is free that I use every day on my drums. We have some free courses. There's tons and tons of stuff. We do weekly competitions and giveaways, and yeah, it's a prerequisite. If somebody wants us to review something, then we have to give away the product.
That's a good way to do it.
It's just, it's a prerequisite. If they don't want to do that, then we won't review the product. Just like, it's all about community and rewarding people and making them feel included. It's really super, super important. I mean, and thank you for letting me be on here, because to get an opportunity to encourage people and remind them, with this absolute deluge of information that's coming to them now, and remind them that it's okay and they can do it is really important to me. I see so much negativity dressed up as positivity, even helping people. And that really drives me nuts. The sort of ranting culture and an elitist kind of way of doing things is only self-serving for the person doing it. What is important to me is about community. We recently started working with the Goffin and King Foundation. I'm the head of marketing and business development for them. And it's all about going in and getting into schools and giving them music school teachers, and even more. We've done even more than that. And we're in we're getting into places that would never have. They're underprivileged areas. They're areas where they don't have enough money. The first school we went into, 60% of the kids are in foster care.
And this is, you guys are going in and helping them learn music production and recording and that sort of thing.
Everything from playing a tambourine and a glockenspiel all the way up to the end. It's super important to us. And it's a charity, and I love being able to do those things. St. Jude's is another big one for us. There's some courses that we sell that all the profits go to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. But we've been doing that since the beginning. It's super important. As a father, I'm sure you understand. I mean, it's just something that you have to do. You're afforded this opportunity to make a living doing what you love. And if you're not giving back, and it's got to be personal time. I see a lot of people like going, hey, if you buy this product, they're going to give away some money to charity. Look at me, I'm great. Like, no, you have to roll up your sleeves and put your own time into this, because I think giving back is really, really super important, because it's, one of the things that really struck me is like growing up in England, in the UK, most of the music that influenced me, I'm sure the same for you, was Black American music. It was blues, it was jazz, and then it was funk and disco, and then of course eventually hip hop and all this stuff. And then we had rock, but rock was all born out of those genres. What are they? Country and blues gives us like early rock and roll, but predominantly blues. And I realized going into some of these neighborhoods in Los Angeles, they were very, very poor Black neighborhoods that had no opportunity, African-American neighborhoods that had no opportunity for these kids. And yet all the music I love was being made by these poor Black kids growing up. So I've just sort of like, it became really important to me to be able to help empower. Now, there's neighborhoods all over the countries of all different ethnicities. We're in there helping people of different ethnicities, different genders, different races, creeds, you name it, economics, they're just really equally trying to help everybody, because music at its core is one of the few things in this world that brings everybody together.
What have you learned about your own style of music and the things you appreciate? Maybe you come from sort of a traditional rock and roll band background, and you're trying to...
I actually come from classical music and jazz.
Oh, classical and jazz. Okay. But those elements...
That's all that I listened to as a kid, yeah.
And then you're trying to help and teach kids, because I've also done some of that, trying to help and teach kids, and maybe their interest is a lot more modern and hip hop and things like that. How have you found ways to try and bridge that difference in musical style so that you can be the most helpful for kids?
That's to me. See, so out here, I came over and I was in like an indie rock band, and then when I I was always producing, but when I got successful producing and engineering, it was actually with piano rock bands like the Fray, and then I did Augustana and James Blunt. It was more the hot EC stuff in the early 2000s. And then Aerosmith was good for me, and Ace Frehley and that kind of the classic rocks, Blue Coupe, with Dennis Dunaway and other members of the Broussard brothers from Blue Oyster Cult. I got to work on some classic rock stuff for a while, which was great. That sort of brought me a little bit back to the rock roots. But actually in the late 80s, when I first started in the early 90s as a teenager, I DJ'd and I did dance music. So I started off, Queen were my favorite band as a kid. They were the first band, but I grew up on classical music and jazz. Household only played classical music and jazz. My dad bought me A Night at the Opera for Christmas and gave it to me and said, "This is worthy." I was a little kid, far too young to even know what was going on. And I just looked at all these pictures of guys with long hair and thought, I want to be like that. This looks cool. What's all this about? So then at 15, my dad and I, predominantly my dad, built my first electric guitar. And I started playing guitar like 15, 16 years old. So I got a late bloom start compared with the other kids. But it was a blessing because the other kids were like, in my area, there was a lot of very, very wealthy kids where I grew up. We weren't wealthy, we were very poor, but that's okay. My dad was a painter and a sculptor, and he made ends meet. But we grew up in 5 of us in a very, very small house, to say the least. It was 584 square feet, and it was semi-detached bungalow, and we grew up in like the poor part of town, all of which is fine. But it gave me a nice big chip on my shoulder to want to work really, really hard for the kid down the street whose first guitar was a Les Paul Custom, And so, Daddy, I'd like a guitar, It was such a big motivating factor to me, and it's why I've always been this nutcase guy that, gets up at 6 and works till 1 o'clock in the morning. It's just really super important to me. I've always worried that the other shoe's going to drop. So I'm always trying to do new things, invent new ideas, have new business models with people.
Yeah.
But most important, empower people up, because I feel like I identify with all of those people that didn't have all of those advantages in life. I identify with them. What I'm blessed with is a nice posh sounding accent, but I grew up with no money.
Yeah.
And I got the nice accent, but that's the end of the story. The rest of it was just work twice as hard as everybody around.
Does the accent open a lot of doors for you back in England?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody cares in England.
I lived in London for a couple of months, and I got a job for a week in a call center where I was cold calling companies. And I learned that I had, that they thought my accent was cool. I was like, how is that even possible? But it's nice to know that it can work in reverse sometimes.
No, I mean, there's nothing wrong with an American accent. People might take you more seriously in some situations in music. They might think, oh, wait, he's American,
Right.
Plus, it's such a big market. Everybody wants to be successful in America,
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something about the business angle, because I do think of you as somebody who is very adventurous. You've been unafraid to go into video, go into courses, go into music. You're doing production. You built a great course. You guys won the Tech Award, which maybe you can tell us a little bit about what that was for and what that felt like to win that.
Completely unexpected. My good friend, unfortunately, he lost a couple of years ago now. Al Schmidt was up for the same award for his book, and I remember Steve Genowick, who's a mutual good friend of both of us, was at the awards ceremony and came up and shook my hand and said, "Congratulations." And he goes, "I just called Al and told him he didn't win." And the first thing he said, and he's like, "Who won?" And he goes, "Warren did." And he goes, "That's all right. I like that guy."
That's hilarious. That's funny.
I didn't expect it to win. We got nominated, so that was exciting. We got nominated, so we were excited. And nobody sent us tickets, so we just assumed we hadn't won because we weren't important enough to get tickets, And then on the day, my very good friend, Mike Van der Lot, I don't know if you know Mike, I'm sure you do. You work with lots of great companies, wonderful guy, says to me, I just want to let you know you and your wife have got tickets for NAMM Tech Awards tonight. I was like, we do? He goes, yeah. They asked me to get you on the list, so you've got tickets. So we arrive, and they'd hastily put a table right at the front, which was really quite overwhelming because there was like some space near the front. Well, slightly stage right, slightly to the left as you were looking, but still at the front.
That's within slapping distance.
Within slapping distance. And I remember It was two wonderful women. One of them was in the office, was presenting the awards. So it was quite intimidating because I was like, oh, that's that lady from the office. What a great show, you know. And they're presenting it. And when it came up to that, it was like mixed with the masters and a couple of Hal Leonard books, one by Al Schmidt, one by somebody else. And then I can't remember if it was 4 or 5 people in the category. And anyway, whatever. Then me. And they're like, and the winner is, and they went, "Pah, pah, 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 pah." And I was like, oh, I wonder who won. And my wife's going, she's like hitting me. I was like, who won? She goes, you did. And I was like, no, who won? And she's like, no, you did. So there was like this perceptible, like 30 seconds of me just kind of like looking around. And so I went up and.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was very, very surprising.
Do you want to record killer drums in your home studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with examples from a Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Do you want to know how to master your own music at home? Rockstars of Mastering will show you how with plugins in your DAW so that your music will sound awesome when you finish your mixes. And if you're looking for a step-by-step solution for a pro-sounding mix that won't take years to learn, the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass with Craig Alvin will show you a proven method for creating Grammy-winning quality mixes that you can apply in your home studio right now. Or if you just need to learn the fundamentals of creating a great sounding mix, then register for my free course Mix Master Bundle to get great mixes using simple free plugins. And get started now making your best record ever at recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy. Use the code ROCKSTAR at checkout to get 10% off any course for a limited time. Every studio needs a good vintage mic for that classic warm sound. Whether you're looking for those airy highs, sweet mid-range, or silky low-end, a good vintage mic can put the magic in your mixes. So it's no wonder vintage mics have been loved and praised by thousands of engineers for decades. The JZ Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia using only the best electronic components and feature the patented Golden Drop capsule design for great detail and richness of tone that will bring that classic vintage vibe to your studio and be a real workhorse for your sessions. This time, our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer only available to you, Rockstars. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTAR to get 40% off the Vintage Series mics V67, V47, and V12, the mic you're hearing right now, at jzmic.com. And that's for Produce Like a Pro, and that's for the education content that you put together, side, which is great.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Let me ask you this question about the business side of things. So as somebody who's been pretty fearless and adventurous in trying things and creating things, what advice do you have for those of us out there who sort of think we'd like to try and do some stuff, but we feel, but we're just on the fence about trying new ideas and sort of venturing out with the work side of what we do?
I mean, it's all interlinked now. I think the best analogy I can describe to support that is I remember in about 2000, I was doing pre-production on Californication, and the first one back with John Frusciante. And I remember, I think it was 2000, something like that, maybe 2001, whenever they were doing that record. I remember their tour manager comes in and said, you'd just been offered, they're going to hate me saying this, but let's say a very large amount of money to do like a Nike commercial to use, like Give It Away or something like that, like a huge song. And they were asking people, would that be cool? What do you think? They asked me, do you think it'd be cool to do that? You know, do you think this would be cool? Because they weren't sure. And I'm telling you now, if that band or any band now was offered a 7-figure sum to put a song, they would be saying yes before the guy
before the sentence was done.
Yeah, before the sentence was finished. It's just a whole different business now. Now it used to be us and them, wasn't it? It used to be when I was in bands in the 90s. It was kind of like you never did endorsements. You didn't want to be wearing anybody's clothes. You didn't want to be playing anybody's specific guitar. It was always about being cool. Now everybody is intermingling. It's like, I got an email from a pedal manufacturer saying that they wanted to send me some pedals to try, and if I liked them, would I do a review? I'm like, yeah, send me the pedals. If I like the pedals, I'll review. If I don't like the pedals, I'm not reviewing them. But the point is like, they know I'm a guitar player, but we're predominantly a production place. So, it's that kind of crossover and understanding. These days, if you're going to do music, you need to have your hand in everything. I've done everything. I've A&R'd at labels. I've produced bands. I've managed bands. I've written for bands. I have a book coming out in a couple of months. I don't know when this is airing. It might already be out, but a book on recording,
That's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. It's taken a long time. 3 years. So yeah, it's not a hastily put together bunch of photocopies or whatever. It's like a proper written book. Yeah. So it's really, really super important to me to understand that everything is connected. Everything is connected.
Yeah.
Publishers, record labels, booking agents, managers, gear manufacturers of musical instruments, of recording equipment, the educational side, everything, songwriting, everything is one big happy family now. And if you've got any aspect you can incorporate and get anybody to integrate and work with you on something, then do it. Don't feel like if you're an engineer, you're a producer. If you're a producer, you're an engineer, you're a mixer, you're a songwriter. I know there's a lot of older school guys saying, oh no, you can't be multiple things. Well, you know what? You can, and more importantly, you have to be. You have to be. Why is every mastering engineer now teaching mixing? Have you noticed that?
Right.
Every freaking other guy is like, as a mastering engineer who's never actually mixed a track in his life, giving mix tips. You know what I mean?
Because they want better tracks to master.
No, because they need work. They're trying to find work.
Yeah,
mastering is something that's becoming very finite. There are a lot of busy mastering engineers. But the sort of plethora of mastering engineers that we're all making a living wage now is shrinking fast, because a lot of the times people don't have the budget to use an external mastering engineer and are using software that frankly is getting better and better and better and better. I don't ever want to remove human beings from our business, don't get me wrong. But we're not recording on wax cylinders anymore.
Right.
Technology is important, and it can be abused or misused, or whatever you want to say. Of course it can.
But it can also be remarkable. I mean, it's so exciting, the stuff that's available to us now.
Yeah, in the right hands and with the right ears, it is the most important, wonderful, incredible, exciting time to make music. And yeah, I love the music that I love, and I do love old gear, and I do love this, and I do love that. But my mind and my feet is firmly in the future, the present and the future.
Nice.
To me. But then I have an understanding. I know when a song sounds better edited tight, and I know when a song sounds better left to be as sloppy as all heck. And most importantly, I know when there's somewhere in between.
You know when a drum fill is supposed to speed up.
Yeah, it's plenty. When I'm listening to The Who and it's down, 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 and it pushes back into the band, it's exciting.
Yeah.
If you would put it now and you'd be like dum 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 dum. You see how boring that is?
Yeah.
It's just that push in.
You just learn to recognize those things from doing a lot of music. And you have to try, it's just a reminder too, you have to mess things up to understand what it sounds like when you mess it up, when it was good and now it's not as good.
Yeah. Listening to like those Bonham snare fills when he like literally adds, like he slows down a bar by a couple of BPM just so he can go and then boosh, push that next one in, like, but it's dragging, so it's like really like it's being hit in the gut, like and then bash. Yeah, you straighten that out and all the excitement goes.
So on that topic, where do you see technology addressing the need for human flexibility and an interpretation of time within a song? In other words, I haven't really seen, maybe I'm don't have my eyes open, but I'm not really seeing big changes in the metronome and the ruler of DAWs, other than, you can do things, you can change stuff, but I haven't seen anybody reinvent that yet.
I mean, all of the technology is great, but it's. I don't know if we're ever going to come to a time, because it's the randomness of what we do that makes everything so great. It's the humanity of it. I've talked about this before as well, but there's very few like recordings of composers, early composers, before recorded music. They would obviously be conducting their own orchestras. And there's very few recordings existing of anything other than the most modern music. But there is some stuff of Elgar conducting Pomp and Circumstance, I believe, in the very early 1900s that was recorded. And every American knows it because we have, it's called Land of Hope and Glory, but you use it for all your graduation ceremonies. Bum, 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 bum. It's always funny because it's like an unofficial British national anthem being used for an American graduation.
Nice.
First time I ever went to my son's graduation from whatever grade he was going to.
Well, that's kind
like,
of...
Why are they playing British? Yeah.
Anyway, that's what the American Revolution was, right? We graduated from Britain.
Yeah, something like that. But anyway, the when he's conducting it, it's like bam, bam, bum, 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 and the tempo change is amazing, like far more than because it's just to make it so exciting. And so bam, bam, and then that comes so slow down that the drama is completely exaggerated. But any conductor that would do it now would never take that risk, never push it that fast, but that's the point. It's like that's the person who wrote it.
Yeah.
And that was the interpretation. And I think that the danger of any product, any new piece of gear, any new technology, any digital, this, that, and the other, the implication of AI, because that's the catchphrase, machine learning is the one that everybody's bored of saying AI now. So everybody says machine learning.
Yeah.
Whatever that technology is, the danger of it is just when you rely on it only. But if you bring the human being in and go, oh, I want it to do this for me so I can get from A to B quicker, that's great. When it's a tool that allows you to get the results that you envision quicker, I don't care. It's the same as recording on tape rather than wax cylinder. Of course you want to record on tape. Of course you want multi-tracks so you can overdub and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't, nothing makes anything else redundant. It just goes, look, I'm still doing what I used to do, but now it's easier to do it, meaning I can be more creative and think of more exciting and interesting ideas rather than spending 4 hours doing something technically that's difficult and lose all enthusiasm. And the problem comes in when any of the new technology, whether digital, whatever it might be, becomes when you're relying on it. The best analogy I can think of that is like Doogie Howser theme tune and Taxi. Remember Taxi? I think was it Whirly or a Rhodes? Like this beautiful fat keyboard. And then Doogie Howser comes in. It's like blinky, blinky, blonky. It's like a DX7. I use that as an analogy. I know it's laughable, but the point is like the DX7 got used for an electric piano sound because it was new and cool.
Right.
This is the hip thing to use. But you go back and listen to it, if... and
why didn't you use the Rhodes?
Why didn't you use the Rhodes? Why didn't you use the Whirly? You know what I mean? Why didn't, but that was the old technology. So now we're bringing in the new,
Yeah.
It's the same thing that happened with SSLs when they came out in Britain. They sold all the Neves and they all went over to America. So I come over here and I go into studios in LA and they give me the history lesson and tell me that, oh, this is from the Townhouse. This is from this studio, that studio. All these Neves that would be, and these are phenomenal consoles, SSLs.
Yeah.
But you're sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater because the Neve at the end of the day is one of the best tracking consoles that was ever made.
So I have permission.
I
have permission. You're giving me permission to keep all the gear in my basement and upstairs in the studio and the loft and all that.
You can do whatever you like, my friend.
All right, good.
That's the point.
I wanted to ask you this question too, if it's not unfair to just ask it, but can you share a success story of one of the students over in Produce Like a Pro? You've been teaching, you've created a community, and I wonder if there are any fun, sort of wonderful stories that you've heard of some of your students that have made you feel real good about it.
We've had a few. I mean, we had one of our students win an Emmy and thank us for teaching him how to record and mix. So actually, I think it's a couple of people. We had an Indian student that we worked with closely. He actually did a home studio marketing course that I did, where we get really, really super in depth about how to market yourself, how to, as well as production and gear and everything. And now he's doing like Bollywood movies and stuff like that. There's lots of those stories, lots and lots of stories that people coming in, plinking and plonking on a piano, MIDI keyboard, through to actually doing it for a living. Another guy, Daniel, hopefully Daniel, don't mind me shouting you out, was making a record for hundreds of dollars and now is making good money per hour, not per week. Nice. You know, there's so many of those guys and girls that have transformed their whole hobby into a living, or their living into a very successful living. And I don't know, I pride myself on it. I see a lot of, I think even to this day, most of the online education is done by people that are still aspiring to make a living. You know, I think we're one of the few resources where we're actually people that are making a living that are teaching it, as opposed to like, I want to make a living at doing music, so I'm going to teach it. You know, that as a phrase doesn't make sense to me. You know, that's still 90% of the people I see out there. I'm watching it, and I went into somebody's academy the other day, and the low end was just not good on the mixes, and they were mix critiquing, and they weren't talking about the low end. And I was thinking to myself, if you don't know how to teach the low end and you don't know how to mix it yourself, why are you teaching? You know, because it's a big differentiator. You know, when you hear a really great sounding mix, is the low end is just beautiful. Can be huge, but tight and controlled. Yep. So yeah, that stuff gets a little scary, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's fun for me too. I mean, I get emails from rock stars who have said that, you know, this experience of listening to the podcast and learning from guests like yourself, you know, just hours and hours and hours of insights has been really transformative. And that always makes me feel so good. You know, it's just fun to,
I agree.
You know, it's like when I had my studio here, I was really excited to have an intern program and start working with the young guys and girls who were coming into the studio and just share all the stuff that was exciting about making records. Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has not gotten you anywhere? Have you been looking for a simple or straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could learn that process from a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is for you. Now you can discover a proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Here's a quote from one of the students. Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. This was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, when you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and go check out Craig's ultimate snare mixing trick now for free. We're coming close to the end here. What else have we not talked about that you're excited about now that you'd like to let everybody know about?
I'm looking around because so much stuff comes and goes, you know, that we try out. You know, like I said, I live in both worlds. I love the vintage. I like some of the emulations. I like the new stuff. You know, it was interesting going to NAMM this year. There was lots of fun stuff. But when somebody asked you what was your favorite thing, I was like, Triad Orbit stands. How did I go in the last few years of not knowing about them? Now
they're pretty great.
Now we have one on the we have one attached to the desk there where we put the camera up. We have one from the ceiling where we have a camera and a light. I'm actually talking into a mic that has one that we also, they are absolutely fantastic. We've got them in the other control room as well, the home studio build control room over there. They're built like brick, you know, watt houses, and we have them coming out in the ceiling and the walls, and they've just changed our lives.
They're pretty cool.
We don't have to deal.
I'll help describe that for the rock stars because I have some of their stuff too. Triad Orbit makes a plate, a mounting plate, and you can just screw it to the ceiling, and then you clip in. You don't need, it's just like a spring clip. Like remember quick release mic clips, that kind of idea where you just clip it right in, and then you can have boom arms coming down, and they are solid. They've really got it figured out how to make them rock solid, where you can just, loosen it, move an arm in any direction, tighten it up again, and now it'll hold what you need. So I put one in my dead room above the drums, and so that I can just do like a split pair for overheads there. The problem is I haven't recorded any drums in there because my Leslie's in the way. No, it's a good thing.
Absolutely superb stuff. I'm a huge fan. And great company to work with.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me go to my closing question. This one's rhetorical, Warren, and I've asked you this before, but I'll ask you again. We're going to take the Wayback Machine. You get to go back in time and find younger Warren Huart, who is maybe thinking about making records. Maybe you're already doing some stuff, and you say, look, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you go back and give yourself now with all this experience and all the things you've learned?
It's not very sexy, as it were, for want of a better whatever thing. It's really just try to be a good person and work with people really easily. I think when you're young and brash, like we all probably were or are, you can miss opportunities by like I said, the sort of emails and messages I get, well, I'm working with an artist and they're not professional, or I went to mix and it had a digital click. I can't believe it. It's just like, it just holds people back. I will say there is a lot of incredibly talented people out there. I would say probably, a good chunk of your audience could do as good a job as a lot of the biggest and most famous professionals in the world. And some of them can be honorary whatevers, but that doesn't really exist anymore. There's no opportunity for people with bad attitudes anymore. Nobody wants to pick up a phone and listen, be told off and shouted at, so they go and work with the people they like. The reality is like, there's a lot of people that can do the job. Now the technology has made it easier for the barrier to entry, because the barrier to entry used to be before is like, you used to have to have an SSL console to be able to mix. Yeah.
You have to be in a studio, an incredibly expensive studio.
Yeah, so you could be the most talented mixer in the world and have the best ears in the world, but if you didn't have the budget and nobody was hiring you to go into an SSL room, you're just sitting there in isolation. Nowadays, if it's well recorded, you barely have to do anything, and you're mixing in the box. And if it's not that very well recorded, you can still rescue it somewhat in the box as well. So the reality is like most people are mixing, almost entirely software-based, and even the ones that like myself, are mixing in a hybrid fashion using software and hardware. And whatever you want to do, the results speak for themselves. You can get there with the current technology.
Yeah.
And you can get there cheaper and quicker. And it's open to everybody. So with all that bearing in mind, what's the next barrier then? The barrier is like, are you somebody people want to work with? So all I can say to myself is like, just because it was frustrating when I was coming up, especially when I moved to America. I'd produce bands, I'd bring them into labels, they get signed, and they'd immediately take the record away from me and give it to somebody else.
That's a lot of fun.
And they would just copy the production identically, and usually really sterilely, and invariably just kill the band's career, because what came from an exciting record where we were co-writing and producing songs together suddenly got put out as like this really sterile, very boring sounding record where every song had the same snare sample on it, and it was just like boom, boom, it was just boring. And that was really demoralizing when I first moved to America, because it wasn't what I'd experienced in England. I'd experienced the reverse. In the UK, they wanted something new and fresh, and they were always trying to do, and they would just get behind whoever came in and produced the tracks, and they would only remix if it really was dreadful. They'd only reproduce if it was really dreadful. Otherwise, they liked the idea of like fresh new ideas coming in. Here, I couldn't believe it. I came over in the mid-90s, and it was the same, 6 guys, men, 6 dudes mixing and producing every record for like a 10 or 15 year period, until the bottom dropped out of that genre and rock kind of died, and then they're left to fend for themselves.
And 2 of them were brothers?
I have no idea what you're talking about. It was dominated by the same people.
Yeah.
And it's tough, because with a couple of exceptions, you go back and listen to those records and they're really uninspiring because they do have exactly the same drum sound and the same everything on everything. But that's what it fell into. It fell into sort of a combination of convenience, of a factory kind of mentality of like, if you're really super busy and you're getting to mix, multiple albums at once, you're going to try and, make it come out a conveyor belt as possible. And if you can get to a certain level of quality, I get it. I understand. I'm not taking away from that kind of theory. But the reality is now I hear stuff all the time. And I don't know who mixed it. Never heard of that person. And it sounds phenomenal.
Yeah. I'm always
phenomenal.
struck by having done so many interviews with people. Sometimes, particular tracks or discographies come across and I'm just so struck by them. And it might be somebody I've never heard of before doing the interview, or it's, brand new introduction to me. And it's really fun. It's really encouraging. And especially, the ability, like you said, to be able to, for all of us to have access. We all have the keys to the kingdom now. We just have to know how to not lose the keys and take good care of the kingdom when we get in there and figure out how to make a great record. It's on the individual now to just do really great work.
Yep. Reminds me of the Dave Jordan quote where he says, sometimes you have to rewrite the song, rearrange it, change the tempo, change the key. And other times you just have to get out of the way of the artist and help them make a great record.
Yeah. Well,
the skill is knowing when to apply the techniques. And I think that's another thing as well, is like a really important piece of advice is just to keep working on your craft. Because like I was saying earlier, sometimes gritting the drums is actually the perfect thing to do for the track.
Yeah.
Most of the time it isn't, but sometimes it is. And other times it's leave it really super loose. And sometimes it's somewhere in between. The thing is you have to have a skill and an ear to know when to do the right thing. When is that one mic on the kit the best drum sound? When is that 13 mics on the kit with drum samples the best drum sound? And when is all the variations between those things appropriate?
Yeah.
If you've only got one way of working, it's a very, very narrow thing. You need to develop all your skills. And all of the greatest music, like we're talking about how blues became rock and roll, and how jazz became funk and disco, and how we got all of this great music that we have now, this blend of all these genres. Keep thinking that. Listen to things outside of your genre. If you're a metal guy, listen to hip hop. EDM and metal is almost the same stuff these days, the way that's produced. I have friends of mine that are big EDM artists that do metal, and metal guys that do EDM. The way they produce tracks, the way they make them slamming and loud, they use the same techniques in both genres. So explore that studio space, as it were. More cowbell. Just basically don't be afraid to listen to other music, absorb it. You don't like disco. Well, you know what? Listen to disco, because without disco, you don't have Another One Bites the Dust.
Yeah.
You don't have Another Brick in the Wall. Those are disco songs.
So rock stars, I'd encourage you again to, there's a playlist of Warren's great work in the show notes. So please click through there and go listen to the records that he has made that sound fantastic. And I would encourage you to remember that it's one of the beauties of this podcast is with all the guests on here, we're including playlists and discographies. So just clicking through, you get this wide variety of music that people are making. And it's really, really wonderful to hear. So Warren, thank you so much for being on the show with us again, man. It's great to hang out with you and great to see you.
You rock, my friend. It's always wonderful. Thank you. I'm ordering myself a salad here. I've got to eat.
Good.
I need to eat today.
We're going to let you
dentist
we're going to let you get back to that, but let the rock stars know, where can they go find out more about you? I know you've got free stuff that they should know about. And what if they're just ready?
Go to producelikeapro.com, sign up for the email list, get a whole bunch of free goodies. You can go to Produce Like a Pro on YouTube, of course, and check that out. There's tons of stuff.
Fantastic resources.
Feel free to come and hang out with us. We enjoy the party.
All right, dude. Well, I look forward to seeing you in the studio or at the next event. And thanks so much for joining us. Rockstars, thanks for listening.
I will, I'm sure I'll see you at AES, my friend.
Yes. Cheers, man.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible. OWC, Spectra 1964, JZ Microphones, Atom Audio, Solid State Logic, and Isotope. Remember to use these coupon codes for special discounts. At isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription for access to many plugins. At jzmic.com, use the code ROCKSTAR for 40% off the V47, V67, and V12 microphones. That's what you're hearing my voice on right now. At recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course for a limited time. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the link in our show notes, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio, and they're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.